Good afternoon, everybody. How you doing? How's this super crazy first day of DevCon going for all of you? A lot to take in, right? Well, I'm excited to be talking to you guys today. My name is Chris Ippolite, and this is FileMaker and Peripherals. And I'm actually proud to be presenting my 44th DevCon session here with you guys. Yeah, I started when I was like -7 years old, so that's why I look so young still. But one of the reasons that I really enjoy talking to people at DevCon is because I like showing people interesting ways to extend their FileMaker custom apps beyond standard functionality. And today's no different. I'm going to be talking to you about a way that you can allow your FileMaker custom apps to communicate with peripherals to add functionality that you've never had, and in turn, allow all of you to say yes to more of your customer requests than you've ever been able to before. I'm going to discuss how various industries embrace peripherals and hopefully inspire you with different ways that you can enhance your existing apps by adding peripheral functionality. I'm also going to discuss how some peripherals are actually iOS devices with extended hardware, to show you how designing for peripherals are likely something that you're probably already comfortable with. Then I look forward to sharing with you a customer story about how FileMaker and peripherals together helped a fire department in California solve some of their inventory issues. So we got a bunch to cover here today, and I appreciate you guys showing up for me to be able to share this with you. A couple things before I get started, though. I know what you're thinking. FileMaker 18 just came out. It has some enhanced support for barcode scanning. What do I need peripherals for if I want to scan? Well, I want to start by taking you on a little journey of some of the things that maybe you didn't think were possible within your custom apps, and have you ask a couple of questions about these apps or some of the ones you're planning on building. For example, can your apps accept payments? With peripherals, your FileMaker custom apps could transact secure payments with EMV, that's EuroPay, MasterCard, and Visa. You could even do smart card certified hardware that enables you to process chip and PIN and even magnetic strip readers. You can include some of emerging payment options like NFC for Apple Pay, which you guys probably have even used earlier today, or even RFID to pay with wristbands. So since businesses are always seeking new opportunities to expand their payment offerings and new ways to connect with customers, adding peripherals to your custom apps could open up a way for these apps to allow them to add all of these payment options. And hopefully today I can convince you that it's rather easy to do that. What about printing on mobile printers? While we all know we can already print to connected printers, adding peripherals to your custom apps can create seamless mobile workflows using Bluetooth printing. There's also peripherals with connection by proximity that provide the ability to connect as soon as a device enters a vicinity, something that's not achievable, of course, with our wired printers. So mobile printers have become essential to automating device ecosystem and communication between channels, but if you add mobile printing to your app workflows, you can allow your customers to extend their app's range by well beyond the desktop that we're already used to with printing. And now maybe some kind of specific things, but hopefully these are triggers of things you're interested in adding into your apps, or maybe the stuff that you've already tried before. How about ticketing? If you have a FileMaker custom app that manages events, you can also manage admission flow and event ticketing with handheld barcode scanners. Adding this ticket scanning to your FileMaker event management apps can minimize ticket fraud and maintain accurate visibility into ticket sales and guest admission, all within FileMaker. Age verification. Perhaps you have a FileMaker app that can benefit from age verification features. Well, multi-purpose devices with magnetic strip reader capabilities and even high-speed barcode scanners can enable venues or bars or hotels to increase authentication accuracy. Ergonomically designed for handheld use, these peripherals will allow hospitality workers and others that have these same requirements to provide better, faster service while extending age verification compliance within your existing FileMaker apps. Is enrollment something maybe that you're doing in your FileMaker apps? For example, an app that could be used to sign people up at an event or a venue. With dual feature magnetic strip reading capabilities and high-speed barcode scanners, places like, let's say, casinos can now enroll players directly on a casino floor. So adding this type of ability for users to enroll members when not at a desk can easily increase the value of your FileMaker enrollment app with little to no extra programming. Another example, got an app that does check-in. FileMaker custom apps used for either events or even travel check-in for that matter could take advantage of things like upright terminals with scanning or card reading features, thus allowing users to admit groups much faster. You could even add self-service capabilities to give your guests a convenient experience at check-in or sign up. So adding any of these peripherals to your FileMaker app workflows can increase the efficiency of your app and help untether users from workstations. Probably one of the more popular uses of FileMaker when it comes to peripherals is inventory control, and I'm sure a lot of you are doing that within your apps. Even if you're using FileMaker Custom or FileMaker Go already to do the inventory control, like scanning barcodes, you should be aware that adding peripherals can provide high-speed scanning and instant data capture capabilities that will easily integrate with your apps. With peripherals designed to do things like resist dust and moisture, and a big deal, of course, is batteries that are made to last an entire shift. These handheld barcode scanners are enable full shift operation in tough industrial conditions. So adding peripherals to your inventory apps will help users gain the visibility into things like inventory levels, or you have more visibility into real time with loss of productivity due to device downtime, all this type of thing. And I'll go into some details on some of that downtime loss in a second. And finally, what about point of sale? If you have a FileMaker custom app that could benefit from point of sale transaction functionality, point of sale peripheral devices can give vendors the ability to complete transactions anytime, anywhere. It's kind of like that experience when you're at the Apple store when you're just kind of standing in line or somebody walks up to you at the store and processes your payment. This is the type of thing you could do with your FileMaker custom apps. So if we take a look at this, so that's just some ideas to kind of inspire you on what might be things that you can now do and extend and add on to your existing apps. But if we take a look at sort of what some of our responsibilities are as developers of these applications, or those of us that support these applications, we have to be mindful about the return on investment. If we want people to invest in us to be able to build these apps for them, what we're really looking for are things that don't require a lot of extra effort, but that actually present a tremendous additional value. And that's where I happen to think that peripherals can really benefit us. So establishing a positive return on investment for your FileMaker apps is obviously critical to the customer relationship. It allows your customers to take the guesswork out of making future hiring decisions and having you come on for other projects. So the more value your apps can add, the more likely you'll get the project, and the more likely you'll be hired for future work. So I think by adding peripherals to your existing apps, you can leverage extensive additional features and increase your app's ROI, and with not an equal amount of additional programming effort. So what I'd like to do, and before I get into actually showing you how we can modify our FileMaker apps, and I'm going to do some demonstrations here for you guys, but before I get into that, I have a couple interesting things I wanted to share with you. I want to focus on two specific industries where mobile devices are really making a huge impact to hopefully inspire those of you that are working within these industries, or at least give you some visibility maybe how other industries are using mobile devices with peripherals, and maybe how you can benefit from these same things. Most of them are built around a couple of interesting research projects that I found. I'm going to focus specifically on healthcare, and mainly because healthcare is one of Claris's core markets of focus. See what I did there, Rick? Mobile technology in hospitals can improve clinical mobility, increase staff efficiency, and reduce cost. So I found this Zebra research study that was just from last year, and I found some pretty fascinating points that I wanted to share with you guys today. First of all, 55% of hospitals cite reduced cost due to the adoption of mobile technology. Hospitals saw a 46% reduction in preventable medical errors thanks to mobile technology. 72% of hospitals cited in this report highlighted improved quality of patient care due to the use of mobile technology. And this fascinating stat that I found, that by 2022, which is right around the corner, 98% of hospitals will have a mobile device policy strategy, and 9 in 10 clinicians will use mobile devices at the bedside, which I happen to think creates a huge opportunity for FileMaker custom apps because we can run on those devices, right? We might need a little help of peripherals to get us there, but that's what I wanted to talk to you guys about. So, some of the things, like we talked about inventory control, specifically in medical, there's obviously some additional layers of that when it comes to controlling lots and such. But multi-purpose peripherals give healthcare providers the ability to consolidate their mobile workflows. So with a variety of functions and easy connection capabilities, I believe these peripherals can help your FileMaker custom apps take advantage of some of these opportunities that we see emerging within the healthcare industry. One last one before we move on to other stuff. I'm going to talk about retail a little bit. Anybody here involved in retail or have custom apps involved in retail? All right, so a smattering of you. You probably know this, but if not, we'll share this with the rest of the folks. The mobile technology, such as handheld barcode scanners, obviously really popular in retail, or point-of-sale peripherals, that's even more popular, give retailers the opportunity to personalize the guest experience, increase employee mobility, and even manage their inventory and workforce. Found another study here. This one was from Forrester, and I thought this was kind of interesting stuff that I wanted to share with you about the retail market and how mobile affects it. 72% of retailers want to personalize the in-store experience. How can we help them do that? 50%, or businesses that incorporate mobile hardware for inventory have seen a 50% reduction in inventory waste. That's just money being thrown away that we're reducing for them. Businesses that incorporate mobility hardware for the customer-facing experience have seen a 50% reduction in customer wait time, like that Apple Store example that I shared with you guys earlier. So with the ability to modernize the retail experience, peripherals integrated with your FileMaker apps can help impact the customer experience and back of house efforts, even in retail. So the unique thing about FileMaker apps, and you've kind of heard me hit this message here, is that FileMaker, they run natively on any iOS device. So what I want to kind of focus on for the remainder of this session is that well, and of course what that means, as you've heard me say already, is that our market for mobile apps consists of businesses that are running these iOS devices. And I gave you some examples of just a few that already have those commitments. Now, some peripherals, and I just want to be aware that I'm let you know I'm aware of some of these, but some of them require that you introduce additional peripheral hardware, but some of them wrap right around iOS devices. And those are the ones I'm going to focus on here because that's really what I was inspired to talk about, because we already know how to communicate with the device and get our apps on these devices. So finding a peripheral that can wrap an iOS device is likely the best way to get the most out of FileMaker and peripherals together. So in addition to being able to run FileMaker Go, there are also advantages to extending your iOS devices with integrated peripherals. What I'm talking about there is why this combination. So these are just things that I thought were really compelling to me because part of when I was thinking about this is, well, I'm really excited about what I can do just with the device. I like going in front of customers and presenting these value propositions to them. Like, look, we can put the app that we already created for you onto the device. We can extend some of the functionality right on FileMaker Go. But then I started learning a little bit about some of the additional cool things I could do or additional things I could say yes to when customers are making these requests for me. And I wanted to share those with you to hopefully inspire you. So first of all, peripherals scan 3.8 times faster than an iPhone alone. It's almost 4 times faster. I'll show you a brief demonstration at the end of the session that shows how fast that scanning can occur. But if we're talking about getting every little activity down to the most efficient way possible, I'll take the 4-time performance gain over using my camera scan on our iOS device. Then there's endurance. Barcode scanning places additional burden on batteries. I don't know if you guys have ever done this. You've probably seen that happen. And if you think about someone who's going to be using your app on a device for an entire shift, battery power becomes incredibly important. So as much as I try to lower my display and get the most life out of these my devices I possibly can in a given day, it's clear to me that anybody that has to use these for work all day and who are doing intensive processing of things like scanning are going to need some help when it comes to batteries. As a matter of fact, I found a VDC research study where it said battery failure is the third leading cause of mobile failure among retailers. So extended battery life with features such as hot swap batteries will enable increased efficiency and eliminate the hassle of having you have to consistently recharge those batteries. I think the downtime that you are avoiding by this is going to be significant. And again, that goes back to that ROI. Also, environmental factors. This is actually very real, and maybe some of you have these requirements in your system already. It's made with durable materials that resist things like dust or drops of water. These devices can make your iOS, or these peripherals can make your iOS devices suitable for any type of environment. Failure on non-ruggedized devices, those are the ones that are just kind of an exposed iOS device, can run as high as 38%. And I found this fascinating thing in that same VDC research study. It said that workers lose an average of 75 minutes each time their devices fail. I don't know what they're doing for 75 minutes, but the point is that they're losing some of that productivity, and it's pretty significant. So the more you can avoid those failures using some of the additional support that you're getting from peripherals, the more people are going to be working, clearly. And then finally, using our iOS devices as they are, there's a lot of double thumb work and clicking things on the side or having to use 2 hands. Sometimes, even whether it be from a safety or efficiency standpoint, you don't have 2 hands available when you're using these devices for work. So when you're using these purpose-built peripheral devices, they're going to be ergonomically designed with repetitive workflows in mind, and they'll offer protections from the demands of data collection and enough battery power to last you for a full shift. All right, Chris, let's get to some demos in FileMaker. Well, I am going to do that. And to kind of tee up what I'm going to be talking about, before I jump into showing you FileMaker with a connector, I actually picked a specific connector here, and I just wanted to acknowledge that there are various different ones out there. I just happened to pick one that was easy enough for me to understand. I'm not a super smart guy, so I wanted to pick something that was easy and approachable. And so what I ended up choosing was hardware. I actually found that there was a conference exhibitor here, and they're called Infinite Peripherals, and they were kind enough to let me use their hardware and peripherals as I went through this process. And they also actually just released a new app, which is a connector, and it's called the Infinia FM connector. And I thought it was a decent approach for connecting your FileMaker devices. And the reason for that is because of why we even need connectors. Well, first of all, natively, your FileMaker apps, or FileMaker Go for that matter, they don't talk directly to peripherals. So with a connector, now we have this connector in between. It's kind of like a driver, sort of like your computer doesn't speak the same thing as your printer, or even APIs for that matter. It's very similar in that regard. So now FileMaker can communicate with the connector, pretty easy to use one that I'll show you here in a second. And then the device can actually send data back through that connector to FileMaker. So now your FileMaker application can have full round-trip communication with these devices. So again, there are other ones out there. And the one that I picked was this one that's called Infinia FM connector. I'll tell you guys how you can get more information on this, but here's the reasons why I liked it. Again, not super smart, so I don't need to use Xcode or the FileMaker iOS SDK to get this on my devices. And I want to get them onto I actually don't even need FileMaker Go, as I'll show you in a second. It's actually kind of interesting. But I can still actually manage these apps on MDMs, or mobile device management systems, which is actually obviously a huge benefit. And you can use scripts or URLs. We're all more familiar, of course, with using URLs to communicate with things like APIs. Or maybe some of you saw a session that I did a few years back on apps on the iOS device communicating with other apps using URLs. This is the same kind of principle as I was talking about before. I'll show you some slight nuances and differences, but I think you'll find them easy to overcome. And then finally, testing the connection to these devices is actually pretty tricky. And while I'll show you that there's some function support for these in the example that I'm going to be showing, that can be somewhat daunting. So they provide a little file that you guys can download and check out for yourself. And it allows you to do the testing right in that app. So that kind of takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. OK, so let's move into actually working with a database. So first of all, what I've got here is there's a couple things that you want to do before you actually start working with the database. And you're going to want to go get their connector. So the way that you go get their connector, and I believe you'll be able to do that on the App Store at some point, if not now. But I went to their website. I'll give you the website address later. And you can go right onto the device, and it'll prompt you to install. And what it does is actually it'll install a profile. So for those of you that have worked with trusting profiles before, you'll just scroll through, find the profile. In this case, I find the one with the vendor name, and I hit trust. This is going to allow me to be able to allow the peripheral connector to be able to communicate with the device. Same kind of setup with other types of apps and even other peripherals. And then in that case, then you can actually go in and do some pairing. So I thought it was kind of interesting that you can pair. If you've paired anything, whether it's your headphones or whatever it is, it's the same kind of pairing process. So the thing that was interesting here, you just go into Bluetooth and you turn the things on. There's little buttons on each one of these peripherals that make it aware. But I thought it was interesting that I can actually sync to multiple different devices via Bluetooth all at the same time. This means that if your workflow has to communicate with multiple devices, at least from a Bluetooth perspective, you can connect to a whole assortment of them if you need to. So this is just me going through the pairing process. You get kind of an idea how that might work. And then it give you a little bit of visibility. Here's that app I was telling you about, the Infinia FM. It kind of looks like this, and it's just allows you to hit a button and connect to make sure everything's working. I can even do some test scans. So here's a multi-scan test that I did when I set up the device that I've got here. And I can even test the printer on this I did on a mobile Bluetooth print. So pretty standard stuff. There's nothing too new there that you're going to have to learn. So now we're going to talk about how to actually prep the FileMaker file. Now I went ahead in this example, and I'm going to show you an existing FileMaker file because I figured maybe you don't have the privilege of starting from scratch on something. So I've got this. Let me just get my menus to show up again here. Here we go. I've got this FileMaker file that I've created before. It's just inventory management. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories with this thing. I'll explain what those are in a second. But before I get into the actual functionality, I have to prep the file. So what I do is I go into File, Manage, and Security. And I have to enable, first of all, I'll go into a privilege set that has an active account assigned to it. So in my case, I just happen to have an account that's assigned to the full access privilege set. So I go into whatever privilege set the users are going to be using, or if there's multiple ones, I'll go into each one of those. And I need to make sure that I turn on the FM, right down here, FM URL script. So, and of course, if I'm sharing this on a network, I would turn on the app, but that's not required by the peripheral connection. So allow URLs to perform FileMaker scripts, because the connector is actually going to be communicating back to my FileMaker app through URLs, so I have to allow that permission to do so. So it's there for preventing security risk if we need to. Okay, now I'm going to get into some scripts. Now, the file that I've got here that I'm showing you guys should in fact be available for download on the session description page. And if not, I believe also the folks over at Infinite Peripherals will have a copy of this that you can get access to as well. But the idea is you don't have to worry about taking a bunch of notes and trying to keep up with me on this whole thing. You can have your own copy of this file, and you can even use it to test on your own peripherals if you'd like to. So I've got a couple of scripts that I've set up here already. And I kind of want to talk you through how this works, because really there's sort of a strategy here, and I set these scripts up to kind of show you what that strategy might be. So first of all, you guys are all familiar with OpenScripts. OpenScripts are the script that we all have that do various different things every time we initiate a session within FileMaker. So if you already have one of those OpenScripts, you can add these two functions to them. But in my case, I didn't have any in the demo file. So I just want to show you that there's these this concept of sending a file name over to the device or the peripheral, and also connecting to it. So as with a lot of the functions that I'm showing you here, you can fit these wherever within your workflow that they may make sense. So for example, I just decide that I'm going to connect to a device right when I start up my app, because the app is, let's say the peripheral functionality is critical to the functionality here. You can wait to do the connection until you get to a certain part of your workflow where you actually want to engage the device. So the first thing that you see here, this is kind of unique to the connector that I've been talking to you guys about. We actually need to send the name of our file over to the connector. And I speculate that this is because for any of you that have used URL schemes to communicate between applications, or even if you've used the FMP URL, you know that one of the critical pieces of that URL is the name of the file that you're going to communicate with. So we can send over the file. We send it over as a parameter. And then they store it inside their connector through the session that we've initiated with the connector. And then anytime it needs to make a call back to our FileMaker application, it knows which application we're communicating with. If you have multiple different applications on the same device, you're probably going to want to embed this sending the file name within the workflows where that might be appropriate. So at the same time, and of course I chose to do this at the beginning of my session, I'm actually doing a function which is connecting to a device. So here I just simply do, and for those of you not familiar with URL schemes, it's really easy for us. There's a native FileMaker script step called OpenURL. This is how we can send a URL somewhere. And you'll notice that this URL, it doesn't have HTTP or anything like that in the front of it. It says Infinia. This is a reserved scheme that this manufacturer uses to be able to actually send functions. FileMaker has their own. It's called FMP. It's an FMP URL, which has some version-specific numbers in it too now as well. So in this case, this is all we need to do to connect to the device. Just an open URL, and then send that function. There's a few of these other ones that I'm going to show you here as we go along, though, too, but that use the same type of concept. Additionally, though, there is a way that you can disconnect from a device, and in my case, I'm using a scanner. So I created this script that disconnects. So it's just a simple function that I'm calling through OpenURL. And now for both of these, I'll go into File Options, and I'll go into my script triggers, and I'll choose Connect to Scanner as the one that happens when I first open my file, and then I'll do Disconnect from Scanner on Close. And again, this isn't critical to the functionality of this connector. This just happens to fit with my workflow in this app. So once I have those two things set up, I can move on to determining the actions where I want to perform the trigger, okay? So in my case, I actually have a couple scripts set up that I'll show you guys here. I have two stories that I'm going to show in the demo, and I'm going to demonstrate how to make these work. The first story that I'm doing is allowing a new record creation using a barcode. I'm imagining that we've just received some new items and I want to add them to my database through my app. So I hit a little plus button and then I point the scanner, which will activate the scanner, and I'll point it at a barcode on one of the items that I'm receiving. It'll grab that barcode, and then the rest of the script will create a new record in my application and then put the barcode into the barcode field so that I can be identified later. So that's what I'm doing here. This is all FileMaker stuff, right? The only thing that might seem a little bit different is you see on line 10, I actually begin this whole process by setting a variable that I then use later when I'm creating the new record. And in there, I'm using the JSON getElement function, native function within FileMaker. And for those of you that have used JSON getElement, you know that it has two parameters. Well, the first one is what JSON do I want to look for this information in? And you'll notice that I'm using getScript parameter. So that's something kind of unique to this approach. Whereas sometimes if you have experience using URL schemes to communicate with other apps, sometimes they'll use a callback, for example, that will tell what script to run when it comes back. This approach is a little bit different in that it sends back a script parameter. So what I'm doing is I'm unpackaging the script parameter, which happens to be in the form of JSON, which is great because we all know JSON already from working with our APIs. And that's what the JSON looks like. Pretty simple stuff. Just says barcode value and then the type and the value. So if I want to actually grab the number of the barcode that was scanned, I'm going to see it in this format. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm setting it to a variable, and I'm grabbing the value from the element barcode. That's it. That's really the only program, and this is probably programming you've already done if you're working with APIs. As a matter of fact, I know it is. And this is I'm in single scan mode here in this case. So if I want to do something where I'm capturing a whole bunch of scans all at once, I'm going to have multiple different rows of this in the JSON, and I'll have to just do just a mildly more sophisticated scripting here to be able to parse that out. But I'll do the same thing. I'll use JSON getElement, and then I'll get the appropriate barcodes out of the script parameter. Okay, just to peek at the other flow that I set up. Here's the excuse me, the FileMaker things that I'm doing. Same kind of thing, row 11 there is where I'm setting a variable and I'm doing the exact same thing I just described. The rest of it, FileMaker stuff. So in this story, what I'm doing is, and I kind of like this idea, is I'm imagining that I'm receiving some items, or I'm out in the warehouse or something like that, and I walk up to an item and I scan it. I want to initiate a search within my inventory application that goes and retrieves that record inside the app and tells me what I'm actually looking at. So if I see something laying around on the floor, I can just scan it and it'll tell me everything I need to know about it because all that information is stored in FileMaker. So again, FileMaker stuff probably looks pretty familiar to you guys. And then as far as how I'm going to do the workflow, and this again is not critical to the functionality of the system by any means, but this is how I'm choosing to do it in the demo to kind of tee it up for you guys. I've got this layout that I've created. It's a iPhone optimized layout, and it has this button on the top of it that is a plus button. That's where I'm going to put one of the scripts, and down here I have another one that I set up where I'm going to attach the script to that inside the workflow where a user's going to interact with this button. These don't have to be button triggers. They can be any other kind of triggers. So if you have any more subtle triggers like layout triggers or object triggers, you can actually use those as well. Okay, so now, and then lastly, not every scan is going to be a successful scan. So this last thing here, I'm managing errors. So one of the things I learned in the using the connector is that if I attempt to do a scan, and again, I'm focusing, by the way, on just scan hardware. This could be any of the peripherals that are supported by this particular connector. But I want to manage errors. So if I get a scan that didn't work properly, or the device wasn't connected, or I didn't connect to something happened with the device, what I get back is the JSON that you see up on the very first row. I get error code and a value and error message. And did some research and found out that the two error codes and values that you can get are a -16, which means the device doesn't even exist, or a -20, which means it's not connected. So I'm doing just one script for error handling because those are the only two errors that I can get back from the peripheral. So in any one of my workflows, I can just point to these. And I'll show you also where, when I'm communicating with the connector, there's places where I tell it what script to run in case it encounters an error. So just to summarize where we are right now in the process. I've paired the peripheral to our iOS device. I've installed this connector on the iOS device. I've gone through and prepped my file by turning on the FM URL script to allow incoming URL requests. And then we have connect and disconnect scripts set, and I even went in and I set those as open scripts and closed scripts within my file. And then we figured out what we're going to do with those errors. So now I got my FileMaker stuff that's going to happen. I've actually connecting to the devices. So I want to show you there's just a couple of steps in here that are kind of unique to this process that I want to explain to you. And I'm going to show you, towards the end of the session, I'm going to talk to you about all the different functions that you can use. Again, these are the ones that are specific to just a scanner, but I thought that's a story that we can all understand at least. So this script here, I called it add new product. Now this is the script that later I will show you. This is actually the one that I'm going to attach to the button or the trigger that's going to initiate this process. Because what it actually does here is set a scan mode. Now in the case of scanners, and this for me was new information because I've been doing barcode scanning on my iOS device for so many years, but other peripheral scanners have different modes, like single scan, which is what I'm demonstrating in this example, multi-scan, motion detect, single scan release, stuff that I haven't experimented with yet, but seems extremely powerful to me. So I'm going to focus on single scan. So if you look inside the URL that I'm sending here, I say function is barcode set scan mode. So before I can actually do a scan, I have to tell it which mode I want it to operate on. Once it's set for that, it's just going to continue to use that until I tell it otherwise, or until I disconnect. And in this case, as I found in their documentation, the parameter that I send is one of those numbers. I showed you 0 through, I believe it was 5 earlier. So I'm going to say, I want to go single scan mode, so I'll go with 0. Now here's the interesting thing, and I hope this resonates with you guys, especially those of you that might be familiar with like callback URLs or such. If not, this is going to be super simple to understand. Two other parameters that I'm setting here are when the scan was successful, what FileMaker script do I want to run? I'm going to show you this script in a second, but the idea here is that when you trigger something, you're actually going to initiate the scan and then, or the mode, and then I'm going to say when you successfully scan in this mode, go run this script in FileMaker when you're done. And I'll show that script to you in a second. Or if you have a problem, if there's some sort of error when you try to scan, you see up there where I do error equals scan mode error. That is the script that I showed you earlier that I set up with the -16 and the -20 and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so in this script, I'm telling it essentially through this one URL and this one function, go scan in this mode, and if it's successful, go run this other script, and if it's not successful, then run the error. So here is the script that I'm running if it's successful. Now, for those of you that like to combine everything together into one script, I certainly can appreciate that here. The only reason that I actually took this approach was just because I want to show it to you as a different function, so I made it a separate script. We could have included it as the previous one. So in this one, you see all I'm doing is, well, that show custom dialog is not vital to the task of scanning. I just am interacting with the user. You'll see that later when I demonstrate the scan. But really, all this is doing is running that other scan. The scan on the bottom is a function that says, when this is successful, run the scan success add. So basically I say set the scan mode, and if it's successful, go down here and then find the FileMaker script that you want to run. And as you could probably imagine, that FileMaker script is the FileMaker things one that I showed you before. Okay, so a couple steps. That's the part that I wanted to kind of drive here. I'll show you another brief example of the same thing to kind of hopefully help it sink in. But what we're talking about is set scan mode, tell it what script to run, tell it what to do with errors, and then the script that you want to run if there's no errors is your FileMaker stuff. Okay? Another quick breakdown of that. Here's the find one. Same thing. I set it for a single scan with the 0. I tell it what script to run if it's a success, and that script that it's running, if it's a success, is my FileMaker stuff. Now again, just as a reminder, when we come back from the scan, when it runs the scan and it says to FileMaker, go run this script, it's going to send over all the JSON as a script parameter. That's why I'm leading off all of my FileMaker scripts with where I'm actually parsing out the value, the barcode value, or if it's multi-scan, it would be multiple values, before I actually go use it within the FileMaker scripts. All right. Hopefully that script parsing thing isn't brand new. So just for some clarification, the script that I'm actually attaching to the trigger is the very first one where I set the scan mode. So you see here in this case, I went into my find button and I actually initiated the find scanned product one there. All right. And in my other case, which I'll be demonstrating later on, I had the plus. Oops. And in that case, that one was the add new product. So that's the first one on the list, and the find scan product was the first one on that one too. Okay. So how do I get these? How do I get this application on my device? Well, you guys are probably familiar with this approach. You plug in your device or your iOS device to your machine, and then you can pull up iTunes, and you guys are probably familiar. Once you select the device, you can scroll down on the left-hand side for settings to file sharing. And I will select their connector. I'll pick the application, and I got to remember to sync, of course. And so now, once that's done, it's actually available on the device. Now, your device is also going to have their launch file on it. This is all stuff that they cover in their documentation. But let me show you what that looks like. Remember that launch file that I showed you earlier, where you can actually test the connections? Well, once you run that, you'll see that we have the ability to actually then open up. So this is where we were doing the test connections. But if you go into settings, you browse files. I can browse the files onto the device. It looks just like our FileMaker Go browser. We'll pick the inventory file that I just uploaded and open that up. I can also connect to hosted files, so then I don't have to go through this process of loading it on the device. I can just simply open up their connector and go and host that file. Now, then connect to the hosted file, sorry. So just to be clear here, we're in their file accessing our own file. So if you're talking about mobile device management, you're actually going to prepare this file for mobile device management. And as you saw earlier, it actually is already a file that runs on natively on iOS, so that is going to be managed just like any other app that you might use. But what you didn't see me have to do here was run Xcode or use the FileMaker iOS SDK, which is, there's nothing wrong with either of those, but for those of you that don't have experience with that, I think this is certainly something that you would consider advantageous. So let's take a look then at how this actually works, just so a little proof of concept here actually. So, okay, let's do my test. So in the test, what I did, and actually this is kind of interesting to take a look at because how fast scanning can actually go. So this was one of the two workflows where I was just using a single scanner, and I set it up on the device, and I had various different barcodes which represented different products that were set across the desk in this case. And I just went and I scanned them, and I was actually really impressed with how quickly the scans could happen. And this isn't even like multi-scan mode, so check this out. I hit scan, I'm interacting with the user, and I'm scanning. Every one of these is a different barcode, and they're just, kind of going rapid fire. Honestly, I just couldn't humanly go any faster. I'm sure if I could, it would have been easier to do so. So I thought that was pretty compelling. This then is the example of the workflow where I showed you that I want to add a record, but I want to scan an existing barcode to populate the barcode field that you see right below the image. So in that case, communicate with the user. And then this is me doing a scan, and you see the barcode field is already populated. I'm already on to the next script steps there, which one of them happens to be, inserting a photo, not germane to this particular task here. So again, you can, in that last demonstration there, you can kind of see how I had other FileMaker actions that were happening after the scan. So I can actually embed the scanning portion inside some of the natural steps that are already occurring. So really to summarize there, before I move on to showing you specifically some of these functions that are available. So we pair our peripherals to our iOS devices just like we do with any other Bluetooth hardware. We install this connector, in this case that comes from this particular vendor, prep the file mainly just to allow URLs to communicate with your FileMaker file, and then whatever other security you might have already set up. And then we set up our connect and our disconnect scripts, and then we know how to handle errors. In my case, I just created the one error. I think you would end up doing the same thing because there's only 2 errors that could happen. You could embed that error trapping in multiple different error scripts, but I found it was easy enough to just do one. After we figure out what workflows we want to integrate with, and then we go in and build in those 2-step scripts that you saw in there into the workflows. And it could be, you could have a workflow that has a scanner doing something and then later does a mobile print. But in that case, what you'd have to do is embed into those scripts. For example, you would say, all right, well, I'm going to disconnect, I'm going to scan, then I'm going to parse out that value. Then in that same script later, I could say disconnect from the scanner and now connect to the mobile printer. Then go and do a print, and then disconnect from the mobile printer and go on with the different workflow. The thing that makes that work is the fact that I could be connected via Bluetooth to all those devices all at the same time. I just have to use some of the functions, some of which I'm going to show you here in a second, to do the connecting and the disconnecting as we go. And then get it onto the iOS device, load the file into the launch connector, and have at it. So let's look at the functions that are available here. So a couple of them are going to be familiar. The connect one is how we initiate the scanner or printer or device or whatever it is. The disconnect, I showed you that one. This is that set file name function. And all this is in the documentation so that if there's any parameters that are required, you can actually find those out there. And then we have a connection state. This one's kind of interesting because you can actually check to see whether a device is still connected. You know, especially when you're on an iOS device, you have things like hibernation that we have to deal with that are very real. And so maybe it's been an hour since the person opened up the app and you want to see if the device is still connected before you run a scan. In that case, you would run this function, or you would embed the function of get connected device info right inside your script, wherever appropriate. So in this case, we've got the set active device type. This will actually tell you the device type if multiple devices are connected. And now I didn't show you any of this, but some of the peripherals have support for RFID or HID card scanning, the wireless chip reading. And these are the functions for initializing and closing. Sorry, I skipped past the close one, but initializing that RFID connection and then closing that connection as well. Additionally, you saw me use barcode scan mode. If you're connecting with the printer, you'd have the ability to print a line of text. It's just easy to do that. It's that easy to do that. The set barcode data script, this is the one that was that second script that I had to communicate with. And there's the same ones, you know, there's the barcode script, that's the one I use, but then there's also ones for RFID and also for magnetic card swiping. All right, so what I'd like to do actually, because really what got me thinking about all of these functions in the first place was I have a relationship with an organization down in Southern California near where I live called the Orange County Fire Authority. And many years ago, they'd reached out to me to ask for some training support on an application that they were building themselves. And during that process, I was so kind of compelled to see what these guys are doing by themselves that they then said that they wanted to integrate some peripherals. They told me about these guys, Infinite Peripherals, that were down the street from them, that were kind enough to give them some hardware. And while my relationships with customers is either between training them or doing applications for them, I was really inspired by these two guys who just took it upon themselves to solve a problem that included both FileMaker and these peripherals, and they made things happen. They sold this to their chief. They got funding to do this. It's a really cool story. And so there happens to be a really brief video here that I wanted to share with you guys, and I think you guys will enjoy it. So if you could indulge me for a couple of minutes here, I'd like to introduce you to the guys over at the Orange County Fire Authority.
Try to go, if you can, do you have some pulled down? Are we going to be working?
I hired Jason just about almost close to 2 years now, I think.
And what level they are in
he had some background and, you know, IT knowledge and stuff. When he got here, he saw some deficiencies right away.
This is our old inventory system. Looks like old school, like Tetris, like Pong. It's easy to sit around the water cooler and complain about what's not working well. So it's telling me it's an invalid stock code. So now I have to try to figure out, okay, well, but it takes a lot to actually step up and say, I'm gonna change that. We'll hang it up here to be loaded on the van. We distribute all the supplies throughout the organization for 70 plus fire stations and 20 plus cities. For example, here we actually have all of our product to go out and get loaded onto these vans.
The inventory system that we've had was put into place in the 1980s. People were handing paper back and forth. Sometimes writing was illegible. We were losing papers, and it's just very unorganized.
This is the sad part. And it prints out a bunch of random pages that you throw away. I was really confused, to be honest, when I started. I'm taking items out of an inventory that we have no faith in. We would get stations ordering these nozzles and say, maybe I never received them, or they're just missing, so we need another one.
We would just kick ideas back and forth, like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you had like a mobile device and you could scan things off the van?
This is where it all starts. Wouldn't it be cool if?
Right. This is the main screen for our inventory system, the central. The solution that we found was the Infinia X and the Linea Pro devices. Just getting the approval was an insane mountain to climb. It's something new. It's not something we're familiar with. So we just decided to research it even more and build an even stronger case. Taking no for an answer just wasn't an option.
We were able to determine that approximately $177,000 was lost this year. It all started with the thoughts of a software need. And so once we did identify that FileMaker would work, we could then move forward with developing a relationship with Infinite Peripherals.
They let us borrow a bunch of their equipment to show everybody that this is something that could work for us.
So much of this battle was about getting buy-in, and I felt like Infinite Peripherals were just a huge ally. They understood that we had a goal and they wanted to help us get there.
Finally, you got in the right hands and people approved it.
We're going from something as antiquated as this to now.
Designing the system, we thought, wait a second, we can cut the data like this and like this and this, and really start identifying trends.
The beauty of the whole process is that we can just customize it in a matter of just a few seconds. We've definitely become total geeks over the past year, for sure.
Right.
Big time.
Super nerdy about it. We're always geeking out.
It definitely surpasses what our original expectations were, and it's all coming to fruition now, and it's just completely streamlined everything.
Thanks for letting me show that to you. I'm really proud of those guys. I like learning these stories, and I followed them over the few years, and it's just a really neat FileMaker story, and I just visited them again this past spring and saw that really FileMaker has then now crept into every single aspect of what they're doing at the Orange County Fire Authority. And specifically as a homeowner with a very flammable house in Orange County, I was particularly excited to see that they were using the right tools for this. And if you want to learn more about that, you can check them out online at the URL that I'm about to give you guys in a second. So while, frankly, peripherals were new to me before I met these guys, and we have applications where things come up. I have to be honest, my personal experience with peripherals in the past has been anytime a customer starts talking about that need, I start slowly pushing my chair back away from the conference room to say, how do I get out of this room as quick as possible? Because I'm afraid to be able to tell them the wrong answer. So I started looking around for some of these things, and through some connections with Apple and these guys here, I met the folks at Infinite Peripherals. And while I want to be fair and mention that they're certainly not the only ones out there making peripherals, they've been really kind to me, and they're actually here at this event as one of the sponsors. So I urge you to go talk to them if you have any specific questions about these things, or maybe even play with some of their devices. So in summary, and so for me, now that I've actually learned that these things are approachable, and now that I've spent a couple Saturdays of my life actually trying to make this work, and it worked, now I don't push away from that conference room table anymore when we're having these sales engagements. Now I go out to the people I work with and I say, anybody need any peripheral stuff? Because I know the answer now. And I hope you guys feel the same way, frankly. So in summary, what did we really learn here today? Well, we can add these features to our existing apps. We can extend the ROI of these apps, which is really adding value to the relationships we have with our customers or our bosses or the people that we work with an organization with. We can leverage existing FileMaker skill set to do this. I think the only real things I may have introduced to you that were new were how to write URLs. But if you're doing any kind of API integrations or you're communicating with other apps at all, you already know how to do all this stuff. So all this stuff might already be familiar to you. There's a couple things that are specific to the particular connector that I was using here today that you might need to get familiar with, but it didn't take me long to figure that out. And you can deploy on iOS without Xcode or SDK. I have to admit, that was one of the reasons I was really pushing away from the conference table, is because these are things that were maybe out of my comfort zone. Well, I didn't even have to touch them. And really for me, it's all about being able to say yes to more customer requests, and I've never been able to. And before, I was literally just saying no. So the folks, I want to tell you guys that the folks from Infinite Peripherals, I have a couple in the room, if I'm not mistaken. Show of hands, gents? All right, great. Well, what I'm going to do is let you guys know that if you want to go to FileMakerandPeripherals.com, you can find out information about the different peripherals that I was using here. There's all the documentation and the functions and everything that I just went through a couple of those things, but it's all well documented up there. Even that inventory file, which I hope you guys are able to access as part of the conference files, I wrapped that up there as both the before, if you want to try it out yourself, and then I did one that's called Inventory Solution. That's actually got everything already done, so you can just kind of start playing with it right away. All that stuff I think also might eventually be shared over here at FileMaker and Peripherals. So I urge you guys to check it out. I think there's probably some sort of promotion going on. Why wouldn't there be, right? But most importantly, if you guys have any questions, I'm going to call the Infinite Peripherals guys over here, and please, if you want to come up here, we can all have sort of an intimate discussion about those things. But more importantly, I really appreciate you guys spending your time with me here in this last hour, and I hope this has inspired you to use FileMaker and Peripherals together yourselves too. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.